The ground beneath a modern city holds more secrets than you might realize. This video reveals 20 foundations beneath our greatest cities that belong to older worlds. You will gain a completely new way of seeing the urban landscape around you. What if the straight line of a main street was set 2,000 years ago by a Roman engineer? How could a sewer built before the time of Julius Caesar still be in use today? We are about to peel back layers of pavement and time to find the enduring skeletons of ancient civilizations that still shape our lives above. What forgotten story do you think is buried beneath your own city streets? These silent architects are the true subject of our exploration. To understand them, we need a clear definition. We are not simply talking about any old artifact discovered by chance during a construction project. A true foundation from an older world is something far more significant. It is a substantial, engineered structure deliberately built by a past civilization that has physically outlived its builders and its original purpose. More importantly, it continues to exert a direct, tangible influence on the city that has grown above and around it. Its presence is not a hidden secret, but a living part of the urban skeleton. Think of an ancient Roman aqueduct, its course so logical and vital that medieval towns and then modern neighborhoods naturally clustered along its path. The aqueduct itself may be gone, but the settlement pattern it created is frozen in the map. Or consider a massive defensive wall from 1,000 years ago. When that wall was finally torn down, did the city erase its memory? Rarely. Instead, the circular path of the old wall often becomes a ring road, a green belt, or a clear line where the architectural style of the inner city abruptly changes. The wall is gone, but its ghost continues to dictate the flow of traffic and the very character of different districts. These structures are the ultimate repurposed relics. Their original functions, whether for water, defense, worship, or commerce, may be completely forgotten by the millions of people who walk past them every day. Yet their physical presence is immutable. They are stubborn. They resist being fully erased because they were built too well, with too much foresight, or on too strategic a location. By learning to spot these foundations, we are not just looking at old stones. We are reading a city's deepest biography, a story written not in ink, but in layers of stone, brick, and mortar. This narrative is not one of simple replacement, where the new obliterates the old. It is a far more fascinating tale of continuity and clever adaptation. A story where the past never really leaves, it just gets woven into the fabric of the present. But how do we know for sure what lies beneath the concrete? Identifying these silent foundations is not guesswork. It is a precise, multi-layered science, a form of urban detective work that combines old-fashioned historical research with some of the most advanced non-invasive technology we have. The first clue often comes from the past itself, preserved on paper. Centuries-old maps, property records, and even travelers' diaries can point directly to a spot where a city gate once stood or a forgotten road once ran. These documents are the initial whispers from the older world, giving modern researchers a specific place to begin looking, yet confirming what is actually there, buried under tons of earth and modern infrastructure, requires tools those ancient mapmakers could never have dreamed of. Today, archaeologists rarely start with a shovel. Instead, they often begin with ground-penetrating radar, sending pulses of energy into the earth and listening for the echoes that reveal walls, voids, and foundations hidden below. From the air, LiDAR technology uses laser pulses to strip away modern vegetation and even buildings digitally, revealing the ghostly imprint of ancient field boundaries, roads, and settlements etched into the landscape itself. These technologies allow us to see without disturbing, to map the skeleton of the past before we ever touch it. When physical excavation does begin, the real detective work intensifies. Every layer of soil tells a story. The style of masonry, the type of mortar used, even the way stones are cut and fitted together, these are like fingerprints unique to specific cultures and time periods. A single coin, a piece of pottery, or a tool found sealed within the construction layer acts as a timestamp, confirming not just what was built, but when. This meticulous analysis is crucial. It separates a genuine Roman foundation from a medieval wall built with recycled Roman stone. It ensures that the story we are telling is authentic, that the foundation we are pointing to truly is a direct physical inheritance from an older world. Each discovery is a single piece of a vast city-sized puzzle. The process itself reminds us that our modern urban landscape is not a blank slate, but a carefully annotated manuscript. We are simply learning how to read the handwriting of the generations who came before. One buried wall, one ancient road, one persistent foundation at a time. That persistent ghost in the urban skeleton, that first and most fundamental foundation, often lies beneath our feet, quite literally. We begin with the Cloaca Maxima of Rome, the Great Sewer. Its story starts not with sanitation but with survival. In the 6th century before the Common Era, the valley between Rome's famous hills was a sprawling, unhealthy marsh. The early kings of Rome faced a monumental task to drain this landscape and create a stable, habitable space for their growing city. Their solution was as bold as it was simple. They carved an open channel through the heart of the marsh, directing the waters toward the Tiber River. This was the birth of the Cloaca Maxima, a public work of such scale it felt less like engineering and more like the taming of nature itself. For centuries, this open ditch performed its vital duty. But as Rome grew from a kingdom to a republic and then an empire, its needs evolved. The open channel became a nuisance and a hazard in the dense city center. So the Romans did what they did best. They improved. They built upon the old. They vaulted over the great ditch with massive stone arches, transforming an open drain into a hidden, subterranean conduit. What began as a land reclamation project became the backbone of one of the ancient world's most sophisticated sewer systems. This transformation is the key to understanding its legacy. The Romans understood that a healthy city required a way to manage what it produced, to separate the clean from the used, and to ensure that the byproducts of dense urban life did not poison the community. The Cloaca Maxima became the physical embodiment of that principle, and here is the astonishing fact: that principle is still in motion today. Nearly 2,500 years after its construction began, the original stone conduit, laid under the orders of ancient kings, still functions. It still carries stormwater and, remarkably, some residual flow away from the modern heart of Rome. Walk across the Forum today, and you are standing above a working artifact from the age of the Roman kings. Every time a modern city plans its underground network of pipes and treatment plants, it is following a foundational idea first set in stone beneath Rome. This is not a buried relic to be viewed in a museum. It is a living artery, a silent, steadfast engine of urban life that has outlasted empires, kingdoms, and republics. It represents perhaps the most intimate and essential inheritance we have from the ancient world, the understanding that for a city to thrive, it must first be built upon a foundation of health. Yet the Roman solution for water was to move it away, a testament to abundance. For another great empire, the challenge was precisely the opposite: to capture and hold every precious drop. This brings us to our second foundation, the Byzantine cisterns of Istanbul. While Rome had its aqueducts bringing water from distant hills, the city of Constantinople, built on a peninsula, faced a more precarious reality. Its local water sources were insufficient for a population that could swell to hundreds of thousands. The solution was not to import water over impossible distances, but to store it with breathtaking ambition. Beneath the streets of the modern city, a hidden, inverted cathedral of water was constructed. The most famous of these is the Basilica Cistern, built in the 6th century under Emperor Justinian. To step inside is to enter another world entirely. Its ceiling is held aloft by a forest of 336 marble columns, each one salvaged from older Roman temples and monuments, a physical recycling of history itself. This was not a dark, cramped cellar, but a vast, dignified reservoir capable of holding over 80,000 cubic meters of water, enough to sustain the city through prolonged sieges or drought. It collected rainwater and channeled in water from aqueducts, creating a strategic reserve that meant survival. The genius of these cisterns was not merely in their scale, but in their decentralization. Historians note there were hundreds of them, large and small, public and private, woven into the very fabric of the city. This created a resilient network, a distributed system where the failure of one source would not doom the whole. Today, these spaces no longer hold drinking water, but they have found a second life. The Basilica Cistern is a museum, its quiet, flooded floor reflecting the columns in a still, dark mirror, a place of profound calm beneath the bustling metropolis. Others have been repurposed as unique event spaces, art galleries, or even serene cafes. Their transformation speaks to a timeless truth that well-built urban infrastructure possesses a durability and a grandeur that transcends its original, purely practical function. They symbolize the universal urban challenge of securing a reliable water supply, a problem every great city from antiquity to the present has had to solve. The Byzantine answer was to build downward, creating a foundational layer of security and resilience that allowed the city above to flourish against all odds. Their legacy is a masterclass in preparing for uncertainty, in building not just for the needs of today, but for the unpredictable trials of tomorrow. While the Byzantines built downward to secure their survival, other cities grew outward from a single, vital line, the waterfront. The third foundation takes us from the sun-drenched Mediterranean to the misty banks of the river Liffey, to the Viking Age wharves of Dublin. Here, the story is not one of imperial decrees or grand architectural statements, but of practical commerce and the raw materials of a new beginning. For decades, archaeological digs in the heart of modern Dublin have revealed a stunning truth. Beneath the stone quays and bustling streets lie the preserved wooden skeletons of a much older port. These are not mere post holes or faint stains in the earth. Thanks to the oxygen-poor, waterlogged soil of the riverbank, the actual timber planks, posts, and wattle walls of Viking Age embankments have survived intact for over 1,000 years. Dating from the 9th to the 11th centuries, these structures were the literal edge of the Norse settlement known as Dyflin. Each timber carefully placed was a declaration of intent. This was not a temporary raiding camp, but a permanent trading post, a foundation built for exchange. The placement of these wharves was a strategic masterstroke that would echo for a millennium. The Vikings chose a point where the river Poddle met the wider Liffey, creating a natural sheltered pool perfect for beaching their iconic longships and larger cargo vessels. The wooden embankments they built to reinforce this shoreline did more than just prevent erosion. They defined a property line between land and water, between the settlement and the wider world. This line became the settlement's commercial spine. Every traded pelt, every barrel of Norse silver, every piece of worked amber entered the community right here. The wealth and identity of Dyflin flowed directly from these wooden docks, and this is where the foundation reveals its enduring power. When later medieval settlers and then modern city planners came to develop Dublin's port, they faced the same geographical realities. The most logical, efficient place to build a quay was exactly where the Vikings had built theirs centuries before. The modern street plan of the Temple Bar area and the very lines of the city's iconic quay walls do not simply sit near the Viking site, they meticulously follow it. The curve of a modern road, the alignment of a building facade, these are often direct, unbroken descendants of that original Norse waterfront. To stand on the modern Grattan Bridge and look down at the Liffey is to look upon a landscape shaped by ancient hands. The waterlogged wood, preserved through a fortunate accident of chemistry, gives us something remarkably tangible. It is a foundation you can almost touch, smell, and visualize in use. It shows us that a city's economic heart is not an abstract concept, but can be physically rooted in a specific location, a site of such perfect utility that every generation since feels compelled to reuse it. Dublin did not erase its Viking origin, it simply paved over it, building its prosperous maritime identity upon the very same timber footings established by Norse traders over 1,000 years ago. Their legacy is a lesson in urban economics, that the most successful foundations are often those that solve a fundamental problem of place so well that their logic becomes permanent. The logic of a waterfront is clear, but a city's rebirth is a more mysterious process. This brings us to the fourth foundation, the ghost of Saxon Lundenwic, hidden beneath a famous London address, Aldwych. That name itself is a clue whispered across centuries, Aldwych, from the Old English for old settlement. It is a direct label on the map pointing to a memory the city never fully forgot. For a long time, the story of London after the Romans left was one of dramatic collapse. The grand city of Londinium, with its stone walls and bustling forums, was thought to have been largely abandoned, a ruin slowly being reclaimed by the land. The narrative suggested that centuries passed before life meaningfully returned, but the ground beneath Aldwych tells a different, more fascinating story. Archaeological discoveries here have revealed not an empty wasteland, but the organized, thriving remains of Lundenwic, a Saxon trading town established in the 7th century. This was not a haphazard camp inside the old Roman walls. Instead, the Anglo-Saxons made a deliberate choice. They established their new community about a mile to the west, on a stretch of land near the River Thames where the shoreline was more favorable for beaching their shallow draft boats. Here they built a proper town. The evidence is in the soil, a grid of streets laid out with intention, the dark stains of countless post holes marking where timber homes and workshops once stood, and deep, carefully lined wells providing clean water. This was not a retreat from urban life, it was a strategic recalibration. Lundenwic was a mercantile powerhouse, a hub in a North Sea trading network that connected England to the continent. Its success proved that the idea of London as a great commercial center was not extinguished with Rome. It merely moved, adapting to a new era and a new people. The foundation here is not a single structure, but an entire urban plan, a successful blueprint for community. And when Viking raids in the 9th century made Lundenwic vulnerable, the community did not scatter. They made another deliberate move, retreating back within the safety of the still-standing Roman stone walls, merging their vibrant Saxon town with the enduring Roman shell. This fusion created the medieval London that would eventually explode into the modern metropolis. So the next time you hear the name Aldwych or walk through that part of the city, remember it is not just a theatre district or a street name. It is a direct geographical marker for the very spot where London was reborn. The city is not merely Roman, then medieval, then modern. It is a palimpsest where a Saxon trading settlement's successful street grid and economic logic became the seed from which the future grew, proving that sometimes a city's most vital foundation is not a wall or a sewer, but a simple, powerful idea of place that refuses to die. Security is a foundation even more basic than commerce. The fifth silent architect is the Roman Wall of Barcelona, a fortress of stone that refused to become a ruin. In the 4th century, as the stability of the Roman Empire began to fray, the distant colony of Barcino faced a new and urgent reality. Germanic tribes were pushing across the frontiers, and the open, sprawling towns of the peaceful past were now vulnerabilities. The response was a massive project of urban contraction and fortification. The citizens of Barcino did not flee, they fortified. They built a formidable new circuit of walls, taller and thicker than anything that had stood there before, complete with dozens of defensive towers. This was not an act of imperial pride, but a communal act of survival, a drawing of a literal line in the sand against an uncertain future. For centuries, these walls did their job. They defined the limits of Barcino, creating a secure, densely packed world within. And when the Roman administration finally faded away, the walls did not simply vanish. They remained not as a museum piece, but as the most useful and sturdy structures in the landscape. This is where their second life began. Medieval builders, facing a shortage of quality stone and recognizing the sheer indestructibility of the Roman masonry, did not see an ancient relic. They saw a perfect foundation. Those massive, perfectly cut sandstone blocks became the footings for new structures. A Roman defensive tower was incorporated into the bishop's palace. Stretches of the wall itself became load-bearing walls for churches and guild halls. The very gates of the Roman city, like the Portal del Bispe, were sealed up and built around, their arches frozen in time within later constructions. Walking through the labyrinthine streets of the Gothic Quarter today is an unparalleled experience in urban archaeology. You can reach out and run your hand along stones placed by Roman hands 17 centuries ago, not in an isolated site, but as part of a living, breathing residential building or a cafe wall. The original Roman street plan, dictated by the wall's interior perimeter, still dictates the chaotic, intimate flow of the neighborhood. The walls created a container, and the city, for over 1,000 years, simply filled that container to the brim. This represents a foundational need that transcends any single empire, the human need for safety and community. The Roman solution was to build a stone barrier. The medieval solution was to reuse it wisely and efficiently. The result is that the defensive heartbeat of ancient Barcino still pulses beneath the modern city. It is a perfect example of urban recycling on a monumental scale, where the fear of one age became the bedrock for the prosperity of the next. The walls teach us that sometimes the most enduring foundations are those built not for glory, but for simple, enduring protection. The need for protection is powerful, but the human search for meaning runs even deeper. In the heart of London's modern financial district, amid the glass towers and the rush of global capital, lies a marker for a foundation of a very different kind. It points not to a wall or a wharf, but to a sanctuary. In the year 1954, as crews cleared the devastating ruins of World War II to build a new office block, their shovels struck something unexpected far below the modern rubble. They uncovered the remains of a Roman temple dating from the 3rd century, dedicated to the Persian god Mithras. This was not a grand public temple to Jupiter or Mars. This was a Mithraeum, an underground gathering place for a secretive, all-male cult popular among Roman soldiers and merchants. The discovery sent shockwaves through the historical community. Here, in the damp soil beside the lost river Walbrook, was proof of a spiritual world operating in the shadows of official Roman religion. The temple was small, intimate, and aligned precisely so that the rising sun on the winter solstice would illuminate a statue of Mithras at its far end. The artifacts found within told a vivid story, a finely carved marble head of Mithras himself, sculptures of the god's companions, and ritual vessels. These objects spoke of initiation rites, shared meals, and a complex mythology centered on the god slaying a cosmic bull. For centuries, our view of Roman Londinium had been one of military order and civic administration. The Mithraeum shattered that monolithic image. It revealed a city that was, in its own way, a bustling melting pot of beliefs. Soldiers from the edges of the empire, merchants from across the Mediterranean, and local converts all might have sought solace and brotherhood in this dimly lit chamber. Their faith was a private, imported one, practiced literally beneath the feet of the city that worshipped the classical pantheon. The temple's fate after discovery became a landmark moment in public archaeology. Due to the pressing needs of urban reconstruction, the entire structure was carefully dismantled and moved a short distance away to be reconstructed at street level. While it no longer sits in its original sacred ground, its original site is clearly marked in the pavement of Queen Victoria Street, a simple stone outline that thousands of financial workers walk over every day, utterly unaware. This act of preservation, though controversial, ensured its survival as a museum piece, but its true power as a foundation lies in the intellectual quake it caused. It forced us to reimagine Roman London not as a grey, monolithic outpost, but as a vibrant, diverse, and spiritually complex community. It is a foundation of cultural memory. Its sudden resurfacing after nearly 2,000 years, prompted by the scars of a more recent war, is a profound reminder. The past is not a single, settled story waiting to be read. It is a series of buried conversations, of private hopes and imported beliefs that can rise up at any moment to challenge our comfortable assumptions about who lived here before us and what they truly valued. But a city's foundation is not only what is built, it is also what is taken away. Beneath the elegant boulevards and grand buildings of Paris lies a hollow echo, a negative space that tells its own story of creation. The famous Catacombs of Paris present a fascinating paradox. While the carefully arranged galleries of bones are a relatively modern creation from the late 18th century, the labyrinth of tunnels that house them is infinitely older. These are the remains of ancient limestone quarries, a foundation of extraction that literally gave the city its physical form. Since the time of the Romans, who called this place Lutetia, builders have been cutting into the soft limestone bedrock beneath the left bank. The very stone that built the city's first walls, its early churches, and later its palaces was carved from directly below it. Paris, in a very real sense, was built from its own cellar. This created a hidden geological legacy, a vast and unstable hollow foundation. For centuries, as the city above grew more magnificent, the ground below became a fragile honeycomb of abandoned tunnels and unsupported chambers. The danger became tragically clear in the 18th century, when entire streets above these forgotten quarries collapsed into the void. The city faced an unprecedented engineering crisis, its own growth threatening to consume it from below. The response was one of the first great urban subterranean mapping projects in history. A special inspection unit was formed, tasked with locating, charting, and meticulously reinforcing hundreds of kilometers of these tunnels. They became experts in a hidden landscape, shoring up ceilings with pillars of stone and creating detailed maps that are still in use today. This work transformed a liability into a controlled asset. The most stable of these hollowed-out spaces found a new, solemn purpose as the resting place for the remains from overcrowded city cemeteries, creating the catacombs we know. But the story of the quarries did not end there. Every time a new metro line is planned or a deep foundation for a skyscraper is dug, engineers must first consult these ancient maps. The ghost of the quarry, the negative shape of the stone that built Paris, still dictates what can be built above. It is a foundation defined by absence, a reminder that a city's relationship with the earth is a dialogue, not just a conquest. We extract, we build, and then we must learn to live with the hollow spaces we leave behind, reinforcing the voids to ensure the splendors above can endure. Mexico City's main square, the vast Zocalo, feels like the heart of a modern nation, but beneath its flagstones and crowded events lies a different, far older heartbeat. In 1978, electrical workers digging a routine trench made a discovery that would redefine the city's entire history. Their tools struck not soil, but an immense, intricately carved stone disc depicting the dismembered moon goddess Coyolxauhqui. They had found the ceremonial heart of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital. This chance discovery opened a window into a foundational world that had never truly disappeared. It revealed the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple, a massive dual pyramid that was the spiritual and political axis of the Aztec universe. The Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, had famously toppled this temple in 1521, using its very stones to build their colonial cathedral and government palaces on the exact same site. For centuries, the immense structure was thought to be lost, buried, and erased by the new order. The Coyolxauhqui stone proved it was merely sleeping. Subsequent excavations have revealed the Templo Mayor not as a single building, but as a profound archaeological lesson. The ruins show at least 7 successive layers of construction, each larger temple built over and encasing the previous one. This was a ceremonial practice of renewal, where a new ruler would symbolically expand the house of the gods. These layers create a physical timeline, a vertical history of an empire's devotion. This makes the site a powerful palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten over time, but the most dramatic rewriting occurred at the moment of conquest. The Spanish did not just build near the sacred precinct, they built directly on top of it, using the rubble of the old world as the literal foundation for the new. The cathedral's heavy stones rest upon the temple's base. The national palace sits atop the ruins of Moctezuma's palace. This was a deliberate act of symbolic domination, an attempt to replace one cosmic order with another. Yet, the result is not a simple story of replacement. Instead, the modern city is a unique fusion, a metropolis physically and spiritually supported by the world it attempted to supplant. To visit the Templo Mayor Museum today is to witness this dialogue. You can stand at street level and look down into the excavated ruins, seeing the ancient stone serpents and altars lying in the shadow of the colonial cathedral's silhouette. It is a tangible, unsettling, and deeply moving juxtaposition. This foundation speaks to cultural resilience and the complexity of history. It shows that a city's deepest foundations are not always made of engineering, but of meaning. The Templo Mayor's legacy is one of transformation and continuity, a reminder that the sacred geography of a place can outlast even the most forceful attempts at erasure, silently supporting every layer of life that comes after. The sacred precinct of Tenochtitlan shows how a foundation of meaning can endure conquest. Yet some foundations are not built by human hands at all, but by the slow, patient work of geology itself. Edinburgh's Royal Mile is a theatrical spine of stone, a canyon of medieval tenements and closes that seems to embody Scotland's turbulent history. Tourists explore the famous underground vaults, remnants of the overcrowded 18th century city. But if you could descend even further past these medieval cellars and the foundations of the castle walls, you would eventually touch something far more ancient and immovable, the bedrock of Castle Rock. This volcanic crag, shaped by the immense grinding force of glaciers during the last ice age, is the city's original and most formidable foundation. Its story begins not with kings or masons, but with ice and fire. The geological formation is known as a crag and tail, where a hard plug of basalt, resistant to the ice sheet's flow, protected a sloping tail of softer rock behind it. This created a perfect natural fortress, a high, sheer-sided plateau with a single accessible approach along the gentler tail. The first people to recognize its strategic genius were not medieval Scots, but Bronze Age settlers over 3,000 years ago. They built a hill fort on its summit, a community drawn to the undeniable advantages of elevation and defense. Later, it became a stronghold for the Picts, the mysterious tribes who resisted Roman incursion. Every culture that followed looked upon this rock and saw the same thing, an unparalleled stronghold. The foundational act was not construction but recognition. The decision by early King David I in the 12th century to build his royal castle here was not an innovation. It was the continuation of a tradition millennia old. He was simply the latest in a long line of leaders to stamp his authority on a site whose defensive logic was written in stone by nature. The city of Edinburgh did not grow outward from a market and then require walls, it grew downward from the castle. The famous Royal Mile is literally the path from the fortress gate down the protective tail of the crag, a route dictated by the glacier's work. Every subsequent lane, close, and building in the old town conforms to this steep, narrow geography. The city's iconic silhouette, its dramatic skyline of spires and towers piled high upon the ridge, is a direct response to this geological foundation. People built upward because the rock dictated they could not build outward. So while the tunnels and closes beneath the city tell a human story of medieval life and later overcrowding, the true foundation is the silent, dark basalt beneath it all. Edinburgh is a city forever shaped by an ice age, a monument to the idea that sometimes the most important thing a builder can do is choose the right rock. The enduring logic of a fortress is written in stone, but the logic of an empire was written in lines across the map. Our 10th foundation is perhaps the most pervasive of all, the Roman road network that still directs the flow of modern European cities. These were not mere dirt tracks worn by habit. They were engineered infrastructures, the superhighways of the ancient world, and their influence is often as simple as looking down a perfectly straight city street. In London, the frantic pace of Edgware Road follows the course of Watling Street, a Roman artery that shot northwest from the city toward the distant frontier. In Milan, the elegant, bustling Corso di Porta Romana aligns precisely with the city's ancient decumanus maximus, the main east-west thoroughfare laid out by Roman surveyors 2,000 years ago. The persistence of these lines is no accident. It speaks to a foundational principle of Roman civilization, connectivity. To govern a vast empire, you needed to move legions swiftly, relay messages reliably, and transport goods efficiently. The roads were the solution, built to last centuries. The construction was a marvel of layered engineering. Crews would dig a deep trench, then lay a foundation of large stones for stability. On top of this, they placed layers of smaller stones, gravel, and sand, each compacted to create a cambered surface that shed rainwater into drainage ditches. The final surface was often paved with tight-fitting flat stones. This created a durable, all-weather road that could withstand the weight of armies and the endless grind of trade carts. More than just physical links, these roads established a template for development. Where major roads met, towns grew. Military forts built along the routes became nuclei for future cities. The roads dictated where markets would be most successful, where inns would be built, and where people would naturally settle. When Roman administration faded, these routes did not vanish. They remained the best, most solid paths through the landscape. Medieval traders, pilgrims, and local farmers continued to use them because their engineering was simply superior to anything that could be built for centuries afterward. As settlements grew into towns and then cities, the widest, straightest, and most central route available for new main streets was often the old Roman road, already embedded in the landscape's memory. This foundation is one of pure utility. It represents the understanding that a city's vitality depends on its connections, on the easy movement of people, ideas, and commerce. The Roman surveyors who plotted these lines with their simple but effective tools were not just building military supply routes, they were laying down the future circulatory system of entire nations. Today, when you drive along a suspiciously straight modern avenue in a historic European city center, you are quite likely tracing a route calculated by a Roman engineer. His concern was moving troops to a distant garrison, but his legacy was to permanently wire a principle of urban life into the map, that growth follows the path of least resistance, and the most enduring path is often the one built to last. A perfectly circular fortress is a statement of absolute control. The 11th foundation takes us to the windswept coasts of Denmark, to the remarkable Viking ring fortresses known as Trelleborgs. These are not the organic, sprawling settlements we might picture, but something far more deliberate, a standardized military blueprint stamped upon the landscape. Built around the year 980 under the reign of King Harald Bluetooth, fortresses like Augursborg and Firkat represent a foundational idea, the imposition of a central royal authority over a fractious realm of sea kings and local chieftains. Their design was a geometric marvel, a perfect circle defined by a massive circular rampart of earth and timber, with 4 gates precisely aligned to the cardinal points. Inside, roads paved with wood radiated from the center like spokes on a wheel, leading to longhouses arranged in perfect square formations. This was not a town that grew, it was a machine that was built, a garrison and administrative hub designed for efficiency, defense, and the projection of royal power. The location of these fortresses was equally strategic, placed at key points along sea lanes, rivers, and ancient highways. They controlled not just territory, but the vital flow of trade and communication. Augursborg, the largest of them, sat at the narrowest point of the Limfjord, effectively holding the key to maritime traffic between the North Sea and the Baltic. This system of ring fortresses created a network, a kind of early medieval command and control grid that stabilized the region and centralized economic activity. So what does this have to do with a modern capital like Copenhagen? The connection is not one of a physical wall beneath the city, but of a foundational principle. Copenhagen's own origin story fits perfectly into this Norse model of urban foundation. It began not as a royal capital, but as a humble fishing village named Haven, meaning harbor. Its value, and the reason it grew when so many other villages did not, lay in its perfect, defensible position on the sound between Denmark and Sweden, controlling access to the Baltic. Like the Trelleborgs, its early success was based on strategic coastal placement and control of sea lanes. When it was formally fortified in the 12th century with walls and a castle, it was following the same logic of the ring fortresses, just adapted to a new geographical shape. The principles that made Augursborg a powerhouse, centralized planning, radial design for efficient internal movement, and above all, a location chosen to dominate trade and provide defense, were the very principles that guided the transformation of Haven into Copenhagen, a merchant stronghold and eventually a royal capital. The Viking ring fortresses represent a moment when Norse society moved from raiding and scattered settlement to organized state building. Their legacy is a template for power, a lesson that the most successful urban foundations are often those built with a clear, strategic vision from the very beginning. They teach us that a city's rise is rarely an accident, but the result of recognizing and fortifying a point of such inherent geographic and economic advantage that its destiny becomes almost inevitable. The story of Carthage is often told as one of absolute erasure. Rome, after its final victory in the Punic Wars, famously sowed the fields with salt, a symbolic gesture to ensure nothing would ever grow from that ground of bitter rivalry again. But the ground, and more importantly the shoreline, held a secret that even the most thorough conquerors could not wipe away. Beneath the modern suburbs of Tunis lie the silent, water-filled ghosts of Carthaginian ambition, the circular and rectangular military harbors known as the Cathon. These were not natural inlets, but breathtaking feats of maritime engineering, carved by hand from the coastline of North Africa. The circular inner harbor was a fortress for the fleet, ringed by docks and ship sheds capable of housing over 200 of the legendary Carthaginian warships. Connected by a narrow channel was the larger rectangular commercial port, a bustling hub of Mediterranean trade. These artificial basins were the very source of Carthage's power, enabling it to dominate sea lanes and build a commercial empire that stretched from Sicily to Spain. When the Romans returned decades later to build their own colony on the ruins, they faced a geographical truth. The Carthaginians had chosen this spot and sculpted its shoreline for a reason. The natural lay of the land and sea made it an ideal sheltered location for a port. Instead of undertaking the monumental task of filling in these vast, perfectly serviceable basins, the pragmatic Romans simply dredged them out and reused them. Later, Byzantine and then Arab rulers continued this tradition, maintaining and modifying the same basic waterfront infrastructure. For centuries, the precise form of the Punic harbours was lost to legend until modern archaeologists, using sediment cores and underwater surveys, mapped their distinct shapes beneath the silt. They found that the outlines of those ancient hand-dug basins still influence the layout of the modern lagoon at Tunis. This foundation is a lesson in practical legacy. It shows that while you can destroy a city's buildings and scatter its people, you cannot easily undo a masterstroke of engineering that perfectly solves a problem of geography. The Carthaginian harbours were so well conceived, so perfectly adapted to their site, that every civilization that followed found it wiser to adopt and adapt them than to start anew. Their silent, submerged forms represent a foundational truth for any coastal city, that the relationship with the sea is often negotiated just once, in a moment of brilliant ambition, and that initial handshake between land and water can echo for thousands of years. A castle built of earth can be more permanent than one built of stone. Across the landscapes of England and northern France, the most enduring legacy of the Norman conquest is not always a wall of grey rock, but a steep, grassy hill where children play and tourists take photographs. These are the mottes, the great artificial mounds that formed the heart of the Motte and Bailey castles, thrown up with astonishing speed after the year 1066. In cities like Lincoln, Durham, and York, these engineered hills were the 13th foundation, a brutal and brilliant reshaping of the land itself to cement a new political reality. The process was a raw exercise of power. Norman lords granted lands taken from the defeated Saxon aristocracy, needed to secure their holdings immediately. They would command local labor, often drawn from the very population they now ruled, to dig a deep, circular ditch, piling the excavated earth inward and upward to create a towering mound, sometimes over 80 feet high. This was not gentle landscaping, it was a rapid, forced transformation of the terrain. On the flat summit, a wooden tower would initially stand, a watchtower and stronghold. In the enclosed bailey at the mound's base, barracks, stables, and workshops would be built. The entire complex was a statement in soil and timber, a declaration that the new rulers were here to stay, and they would look down upon their subjects from a height of their own making. The true genius of the Motte was its adaptability. Over decades, as Norman control solidified, the wooden towers were replaced with formidable stone keeps, like the iconic one atop Clifford's Tower in York. But the foundation remained the same compacted earth, the man-made mountain. This physical reshaping created a permanent visual and social hierarchy in these cities. The older Saxon or Roman town typically occupied the lower ground, near the river or the old marketplace. The Norman motte was placed to dominate it, often on the edge of the existing settlement or on a site of previous significance, literally overshadowing the community. To live in the shadow of the motte was to live under the watchful eye of foreign power every single day. The skyline itself taught a lesson in authority. Centuries later, even after the wooden palisades rotted away and the stone keeps fell into ruin, the mounds themselves proved almost indestructible. They were too large to easily remove, and their strategic views made them valuable for later military or civic use. In Durham, the colossal mound carrying the cathedral and castle defines the entire world-famous peninsular silhouette. In Lincoln, the steep climb from the old Roman city up to the Norman castle on its high motte is the city's central geographic experience. These are not silent foundations, they are bold, inescapable ones. They teach us that the most effective foundations of control are not always hidden, but can be deliberately conspicuous, using the very shape of the land to permanently alter the psychology of a place. The mottes turned military necessity into a lasting geographic fact, ensuring that the story of the conquest would never be just a chapter in a book, but a hill you must walk around, or better yet, a climb you must make to see the view the conquerors commanded. The geography of fear is also a foundation. While conquerors built hills to watch over cities, medieval communities made a different kind of map, one charted by the wind and a desperate need for separation. On the gentle slopes just beyond the city walls, often along a main road leading out of town, you might find the quiet remains of a medieval leper hospital. London's St. James's Palace, a grand royal residence, sits on land that was once the Hospital of St. James, founded in the 12th century for women affected by leprosy. This pattern repeated across Europe in cities from Paris to Canterbury. These were not mere huts, but substantial complexes with their own chapels, gardens, and cemeteries, functioning as self-contained communities for those living with the illness. Their placement was a deliberate act of urban planning, a public health measure born of limited medical understanding. Authorities chose sites carefully, typically downwind of the main population and at a defined distance outside the walls. This created a formalized zone for the marginalized, a buffer between the perceived health of the city and the hardship at its edges. The foundation here is one of social geography, a line drawn not for defense against armies, but against the invisible threat of contagion. It was a grim but pragmatic solution, acknowledging a community's responsibility to care for its sick while also seeking to protect the majority. The profound irony and the key to their legacy as a foundation is what happened next. As medical understanding advanced and the prevalence of such illnesses changed, many of these hospitals fell into disuse. Their chapels might be repurposed, their land sold. But the city never forgot the roads that led to them. When urban expansion began in earnest centuries later, pressing beyond the old walls, these once remote roads became natural arteries for new development. The open fields around the old hospital, already cleared and owned by the city or the church, were prime real estate. Peaceful suburbs grew up, enveloping the ancient site. Today, a neighborhood park, a quiet churchyard, or even the footprint of a modern building may rest directly above the buried stones of the hospital chapel and the resting places of those who lived there. This transformation from a place of isolation to one of community is a powerful urban story. It speaks to resilience and change. These sites represent an early, foundational attempt to manage public health through spatial planning, a recognition that a city's physical layout must account for the well-being of all its inhabitants, even if the methods seem distant to us now. Walking through such a neighborhood today, you feel a profound peace, a testament to how cities heal and grow over their own difficult histories. The fear that once dictated a map has faded, leaving behind only quiet streets and the deep, layered memory of the ground. The desert teaches a harsh and unforgiving lesson about survival. Far from the crowded streets of European capitals, in the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, lies a foundation story written not in stone but in water. The ancient city of Petra, carved directly into the sandstone by the Nabateans, is a marvel of architecture, yet its true genius is invisible to the first-time visitor. The foundation of this desert metropolis was not its breathtaking temples, but an intricate, city-wide system of hydraulic engineering. In an environment where rain was rare but devastating flash floods were a constant threat, the Nabateans performed a kind of environmental alchemy. They transformed their greatest danger into their most precious resource. Their entire urban plan was built around controlling, channeling, and meticulously conserving every single drop of water that fell from the sky. They constructed massive diversion dams in the narrow Sick, the main gorge leading into the city, to break the force of floodwaters. They carved channels along the canyon walls to guide this captured water into a network of underground cisterns and storage pools. Every cliff face and courtyard was designed with gutters and conduits to harvest rainwater. This system was the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of Petra's existence. It allowed a population of thousands to thrive in the heart of the desert, creating gardens, supporting industry, and establishing Petra as a wealthy hub on the incense trade routes. The city's stunning facades are what we remember, but they are merely the facade of a deeper achievement. The silent, empty water channels and the hidden cisterns tell the more profound story. When this hydraulic system fell into disrepair after the Roman annexation and a catastrophic earthquake, Petra's fate was sealed. The city did not fall to an army. It was gradually abandoned as its foundational life support system failed. Petra's legacy is a universal principle for urban survival. Whether a city faces desert drought, river floods, or rising sea levels, its most critical foundation is often the one that manages its delicate relationship with the natural environment. The Nabateans understood that a city is not separate from the landscape that cradles it, but a conversation with it. Their greatest monument was not the treasury, but the decision to listen to the desert and answer its challenges with breathtaking ingenuity. A city under siege is a world turned inward, where every movement above ground is a risk. In the ancient port of Acre, the Crusaders faced this reality for nearly 200 years, surrounded by rivals and the constant threat of attack. Their ingenious response was to build a second, hidden city beneath the first, a foundation of shadow and stone. While magnificent walls and towers defined the skyline, the true key to their endurance lay in a secret network of fortified tunnels, discovered only in the late 20th century. These were not mere escape routes, but vital arteries of military logistics. The most famous of these, the Templo Tunnel, is a masterwork of medieval engineering, stretching over 300 meters from the city's mighty fortress directly to its port. Walking through it today, you move through a cool, narrow passage of precisely cut stone, the air still and heavy with the memory of urgency. This tunnel allowed the knights to move troops, messengers, and supplies from their secure headquarters to the waterfront without ever stepping into the open streets, vulnerable to arrows or ambush. It turned the city into a single, connected organism where strength could be shifted invisibly from its heart to its lifeline at the sea. This represents a profound evolution in urban defense. It shows that by the height of the medieval period, the foundation of a fortified city was no longer just its imposing walls, but also its controlled interior lines. Survival depended on maintaining communication and supply when the world outside the walls was pure hostility. The tunnels of Acre are a lesson in depth, both literal and strategic. They reveal a layer of urban planning concerned not with grandeur, but with grim necessity, with creating a resilient underground skeleton that could keep the city alive during its darkest hours. After the Crusader period, these tunnels were forgotten, sealed by rubble and time, as new empires built their own layers atop the old. Their rediscovery reminds us that a city's most critical foundations are sometimes the ones designed to never be seen. The silent, strategic connections that mean the difference between holding fast and falling. The tunnels of Acre reveal a city planning for survival in the face of immediate, visible threats. Yet the most enduring foundations are sometimes those built not against a human enemy, but against the very character of the land itself. 17 centuries before the first stone of a Roman road was laid in northern Italy, a different kind of pioneer was laying down a foundation of astonishing ambition. Beneath the famously fertile plains where cities like Modena and Parma now stand, the ground holds the memory of the Terramare. These were not simple villages of the Bronze Age, but intricate, artificial islands of human ingenuity. Imagine a vast, watery landscape of marshes and seasonal floods. The people of this era, over 3,000 years ago, did not flee from this challenging environment. Instead, they mastered it. They drove countless wooden piles deep into the soft earth, creating stable platforms above the waterline. On these platforms, they built their homes, surrounding the entire community with high earthen embankments and deep protective moats. Each Terramare settlement was a self-contained fortress of wood and soil, a deliberate creation of dry land where none naturally existed. This was an early, profound act of environmental engineering. The Terramare people were not just building shelters, they were fundamentally reshaping the wetlands for agriculture and security. The drainage created by their moats and channels helped reclaim land for fields, while the nutrient-rich sediments of the marsh, once managed, became incredibly productive. Their foundation was an agricultural one, a radical act of making the land reliably feed a concentrated population. When these particular settlements were eventually abandoned, their lasting impact was not a grid of streets or a pattern of walls. It was the altered landscape itself. Centuries of this kind of intensive, organized land management had gradually transformed wide stretches of the Po Valley from untamed wetland into stable, workable plain. This prepared the stage for everyone who followed. The Etruscans, and later the Romans, did not have to start from scratch when they established their own farms and towns in the region. They inherited a geography that had already been tamed and made fertile by countless generations of earlier hands. The Roman city of Mutina, modern Modena, could rise and thrive precisely because the surrounding countryside could reliably produce the surplus grain to feed its citizens. This is a foundation of profound subtlety. You cannot point to a single Terramare timber beneath a modern building, yet the entire prosperous character of the region, the very possibility of dense urban life here, rests upon those ancient wooden platforms. It is a story of incremental legacy where the collective work of a forgotten people, season after season, slowly turned a difficult land into a cradle for civilization. Their achievement whispers a fundamental truth that before a city can be a center of commerce or culture, it must first be a place that can reliably be fed. The true foundation of many great cities is not in their stone, but in the soil, patiently prepared millennia ago by those who first learned to draw sustenance from the earth. The soil of the Po Valley tells a story of slow transformation, a foundation built by generations of farmers, yet some foundations are carved not from the landscape but directly into its soul. In the highlands of Ethiopia, the town of Lalibela holds a foundation of breathtaking ambition, one that inverted the entire logic of construction. Here, in the 12th and 13th centuries, master builders did not raise towers of stone toward the heavens. Instead, they commanded their workers to carve downward into the living volcanic rock of the mountainside to reveal entire churches that had been waiting within the earth. This was not simple excavation. It was a sacred act of revelation, a process of removing everything that was not a church to uncover the holy structure believed to be slumbering in the stone. The result is a complex of 11 monolithic structures, each one a single, continuous piece of the mountain, hollowed out to create naves, columns, altars, and domes. The most iconic, the Church of St. George, is shaped like a perfect cross, a colossal symbol sunken into a deep, rectangular pit, accessible only by a narrow tunnel. But these individual wonders are only part of the foundation. The builders also carved a labyrinth of ceremonial trenches, drainage channels, and connecting passageways between the churches, some so narrow and deep they are called symbolic representations of the River Jordan. This entire network, all carved from the top down, forms a complete subterranean holy city. Its foundational purpose was explicitly spiritual. King Lalibela, for whom the site is named, sought to create a new Jerusalem for African Christians at a time when pilgrimage to the Holy Land was made perilous by conflict. The layout of the complex, with its north-south and east-west axes, its place names, and its topography, was designed as a symbolic replica of Jerusalem. The foundation here is conceptual, an entire urban plan born not from commerce or defense, but from profound faith and a desire to manifest the divine on earth. The city's primary reason for being was, and remains, its sacred geography. This makes Lalibela a powerful counterpoint to every other foundation we have explored. While Roman sewers and Viking wharves were built for practical necessity and later repurposed, Lalibela was conceived and executed for a purely spiritual necessity. Its form is its function, permanently fused. The churches cannot be moved, expanded, or easily modified. They are the mountain itself. This creates a foundation of unparalleled permanence and focus. For centuries, the site has functioned as a living center of pilgrimage and worship, its very architecture demanding a physical descent, a humble journey downward before one can look upward in prayer. It teaches us that a city's most enduring foundation can be an idea made manifest in rock, a testament to the human need to shape the world not just for the body, but for the spirit, creating a sacred anchor that holds fast through the ages. Salt was the white gold of the medieval world, and its safekeeping required a fortress. Beneath the ornate stepped gables and red brick facades of Lübeck's merchant houses lies a hidden, echoing world of vaulted cellars, a subterranean treasury built not for wine but for wealth itself. These are the cellars of the Hanseatic League, a vast, interconnected network of storage spaces that form the true economic bedrock of cities across the Baltic. For the wealthy merchants of this powerful trading alliance, the grand homes above street level were statements of success, but the cool, dark chambers below were the engines of it. Here, in these meticulously constructed brick vaults, the volatile fortunes of maritime trade were transformed into stable, tangible assets. A ship arriving from Portugal might carry a hold full of salt, a vital commodity for preserving the herring that was the lifeblood of northern European diets. That salt could not simply sit on the docks. It needed a secure, dry place, safe from theft, fire, and the damp sea air. The solution was to build downward. Merchants invested heavily in these underground spaces, engineering them with thick walls and arched ceilings that could support the weight of the city above while maintaining a constant, cool temperature ideal for preserving grain, wool, fine cloth, and barrels of precious goods. This created a hidden city beneath the city, a parallel landscape of commerce where wealth was literally embedded in the foundation. The cellars were more than just storage, they were a financial instrument. A full cellar meant security. It meant a merchant could wait for the most favorable market prices rather than selling in desperation. It meant he could leverage his stored goods for credit to fund the next voyage. The economic power of the Hanseatic League was not just in its ships sailing the grey Baltic, but in this quiet, steadfast capacity to hold and manage the fruits of those voyages. In Tallinn, you can still walk through these cavernous spaces beneath the old town, feeling the sheer mass of brick and the profound quiet. The atmosphere is one of immense stability, a deliberate contrast to the unpredictable world of storms and markets above. This foundation speaks to a universal urban truth that prosperity requires not just the means to acquire wealth, but the infrastructure to preserve it. The Gothic splendor of a Hanseatic city skyline is a magnificent facade, but its enduring legacy was secured in the damp, dark, and brilliantly practical world underfoot, where the most valuable thing a merchant could build was not a taller house, but a deeper, stronger cellar. But the most hidden foundation of all may be the one that still flows beneath our streets, unseen and unheard. Our final silent architect is the Ghost River, the lost waterway deliberately buried by the modern city. In London, the Fleet River once ran openly from the hills of Hampstead down to the Thames, a wide stream that gave its name to Fleet Street. In Paris, the gentle Beaver meandered through the left bank, its waters used by tanners and dyers. And in Toronto, Taddle Creek wound through ravine and meadow, providing fresh water for early settlers. These were not minor brooks, but significant features of the landscape, the original reasons settlements often clustered on their banks. For centuries, they served dual and conflicting purposes. They were sources of drinking water and power for mills, yet they also became the most convenient open sewers for a growing population. By the 19th century, as cities swelled during the Industrial Age, these rivers became intolerable. Choked with waste and synonymous with disease, they were seen not as assets, but as public health crises waiting in the open air. The solution was not to clean them, but to hide them. In a monumental act of urban engineering, these rivers were encased. Workers built massive brick tunnels, sometimes large enough to walk through, directly over the watercourses. The rivers were diverted into these new conduits, becoming part of the burgeoning subterranean sewer network. Then, the old riverbeds were filled in with rubble and soil, and new streets and buildings were laid on top. This act represented a foundational shift in how cities saw themselves. It was a declaration that the natural world, in its untamed state, had no place in the modern, sanitary metropolis. Land was too valuable to be given over to a smelly, unpredictable stream. Burying the river freed up immense tracts of prime real estate for development, allowing the city grid to expand in straight, uninterrupted lines. The meandering path of a creek was an inconvenience, so it was erased from the map. Yet, like all foundations from older worlds, these rivers refused to vanish completely. They became hydrological ghosts. Their buried channels still follow their ancient courses, and during heavy rains, you can sometimes hear the roar of their amplified flow deep within the sewer system. They shape the city in subtle but profound ways. Construction projects digging foundations must account for the soft, unstable soil of the old riverbed. Drainage patterns are still dictated by this hidden watershed. In very wet seasons, these ghost rivers can reassert themselves, causing basement flooding along their forgotten paths, a quiet reminder of the landscape's enduring memory. The encapsulation of these rivers is a foundation of control, a testament to humanity's desire to impose order on nature for reasons of health and commerce. But it also represents a loss, the severing of a city's visible connection to the water that first gave it life. To walk along Farringdon Road in London today is to walk directly above the buried Fleet, a river that now exists only as a thunderous echo in a pipe during a storm. It is the ultimate repurposing, where a source of life became a vector of illness and was then transformed into a hidden artery of waste. This final foundation teaches us that a city's relationship with its environment is a constant negotiation, a series of choices to embrace, channel, or conceal the natural forces that shaped its birth. The ghost rivers flow on, unseen but essential, the most silent and persistent architects of all, reminding us that even when we pave over our past, we can never fully stop its current. This layered world beneath our feet is the ultimate testament to continuity. Our journey through these 20 foundations reveals a profound truth. Our modern cities are not clean slates but living museums. Their growth, their very shape, has been subtly guided and constrained by the physical decisions of ancient engineers, builders, and planners. From the relentless flow of a Roman sewer to the stubborn timber of a Viking dock, these subterranean structures are more than relics. They are the enduring signatures of past civilizations. They remind us that urban life is not a series of disconnected eras, but a single, continuous story of adaptation and legacy. Each generation inherits the stubborn footprints of the last, and our greatest innovations are often just new ways to answer old questions of water, security, and connection. The ground we build upon is already inscribed with a deep and patient logic, so the next time you walk a city street, pause for a moment, feel the pavement beneath your shoes, and remember that you are traversing a landscape of layers, a vertical history where every corner, every straight boulevard might rest directly upon a forgotten world. If this exploration of hidden history has captivated you, there are countless more stories waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe for more deep dives into the past that shapes our present. And we would love to hear from you. Which ancient foundation beneath a modern city fascinates you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below.